Guess what? Sunday Sanctuary is produced by a non-profit, which makes perfect sense, right? And it's also quite fun because you never know where the money's going to come from. So this is your invitation to join that fun by supporting this kaupapa and helping to share something you love with even more people looking for soul-nourishing spiritual conversations. It's simple. You can choose between a one-off donation or become a regular supporter and help Sam and I keep making Sunday Sanctuary. To give now, head to our website, sundaysanctuary.nz. Kia ora, and thank you.
Baby, I can find my treasure. There's too much for me to do. Baby, I can find my treasure. Maybe my treasure rests in you.
Sunday Sanctuary with Petra Bagust.
E ngā manu, e ngā reo, mai e ngā hau e whā. Ta tū mai nei ki te manga o tēnei rākau whakaruru hau, tau mai nei ki tēnei kaupapa. E papahau atu nei ki a koutou arā ko Sunday Sanctuary. Ko Petra Bagust tēnei, e rere ana ngā mihi ki a koutou katoa. To everyone from each corner of this country, come rest on the branch of this sheltered tree. You're welcome to this project, this space, Sunday Sanctuary. I'm Petra Bagust and I acknowledge you all. Today we are talking about peace. And peace is a massive topic. It's monstrous and it shows up in so many forms, and it's something that a lot of religions talk about. A lot of people who are agnostic, who are capitalist, who are faith-based, who are unfaith, everybody, people will talk about peace. They'll talk about the absence of peace. And Sam, you wanted to do this episode. Why?
I, for some reason, came across the news story of when the three men broke into the Waihopai spy base. And I just have the vaguest recollection of it being on the news when I was a kid. So I did some more digging into it and just was really surprised to discover that the three men who broke in were all Catholic. They were all Christian. It was just, here's these three guys who've taken very drastic action.
In the name of peace.
In the name of peace.
It's fascinating.
But they're taking action in the name of peace for others. But so much of the world goes looking for peace for themselves personally. Do those two things line up? What's the overlap? What do people mean when they... Because I think the sort of observation that I got down to was when you look at those who are taking action, hoping to bring about peace for others, no matter what that looks like or how they do that, it results in a pretty distinct lack of personal inner peace for themselves. If we're going to stick with the dictionary definition of peace, which is the absence of conflict.
Mm-hmm. In fact, you could argue that the absence of conflict is really unhealthy and dangerous. Like, healthy conflict is part of right relationship in some ways. Like, healthy conflict is part of like equals coming together with different ideas in this reality that we live in, right?
And so as I thought that, I was like, well, hang on. All of a sudden, the dictionary definition of things starts to sound quite shallow.
I thought you were going to say sucks, but well, dictionary definition sucks.
It kind of does.
Yeah.
It kind of does.
Yeah. Okay, so this is cool because we are going to go and have a look at these different forms of peace in this episode. And I remember as a young woman, for me, peace was the absence of action, similar to holiness, like this idea that I had done nothing wrong, I had caused no harm, I was not in chaotic action, I was in a type of nirvana of nothingness. And I couldn't even imagine a place like that. Like, I couldn't comprehend of the stillness, the quietness, the absence that my definition of peace, encompassed. So this is lovely to revisit the idea of peace. Peace isn't about, say, an absence of suffering or an absence of discomfort. Peace is much more robust than that. And at times it is still and quiet. So let's go listen to Sharon and Adrian and Dave.
Sunday Sanctuary with Petra Bagust.
I recently rewatched a new favourite film of mine called The Outrun, starring Saoirse Ronan. In the movie, Saoirse's character Rona moves to the secluded Scottish island of Papa Westray in search of solitude as she gets through the rough first few months of recovery from alcoholism.
You think you're doing well. Suddenly you want nothing more than a drink.
She goes in search of peace. As I sat and watched, I thought about other films I've seen where the main character heads off on their own in search of peace. There's Wild with Reese Witherspoon.
I just need to find something in myself, I think the trail is good for that.
There's Into the Wild with Emile Hirsch.
No, nothing. Just be out there. Just be out there in it.
And even Eat, Pray, Love.
You want to go away for a year?
Do you know what I felt when I woke up this morning, Delia? Nothing. No passion, no spark, no faith, no heat, absolutely nothing.
And I realised how common a theme it is, and also how relatable. I might not have travelled quite the same distance in search of peace, but I know I've definitely taken myself away from my home and my routines looking for it. One of the places I've gone before is quite literally called Peacemakers Retreat Centre in Parakai, just north of Auckland. So I went back out there to talk with Shannon Mawdsley, who lives and works on site.
So, is it all right? Are you all right talking in the shade?
Yeah.
Yeah,
fine.
cool. So the whole property, it's 15 acres, and it was, in its current form, was bought by a family, 3 families. They all had a heart for young people. So they sold their houses, put all their money into a common purse, bought this place, and then and it was just the top part of the old house that was livable. So they all lived in that. And the bottom was developed, and then they built the houses around it. And then they had at-risk youth come and live in the big house. Yeah. And they looked after them. So that's kind of how it started in its current form.
So why the name Peacemakers?
See, I don't know that history. I don't know how we've got... because I think the trust they set up, they called it the Peacemakers Trust. I mean, the whole kaupapa is about basically being a place of peace where people can come and experience that and have a place that has that sacred quality to it, so that people could sink into themselves, connect with the land, and connect with other people and with God, kind of that 4-way relational peace.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really holistic idea of what peace is.
Yeah. Because in my research for putting this together, I came across the word Shalom, which is, the Hebrew word that in the English translation of the Bible has been translated into peace. But when you look at the definition of Shalom, it's a lot more expansive.
Yes. Yeah.
What's your understanding of Shalom?
So Shalom is this idea of flourishing, of really holistic, and it's that sense of flourishing on all levels, like with yourself, with other people, with your community, even with the world, if that's at all possible. Like it's a big concept, and I don't know there are any English words that really can capture what shalom really means. Yeah. It's this idea of goodness, and health, and
would you say the repairing of relationships?
Yeah, definitely. That's all part of that piece. We are relational beings. We cannot exist outside of a relationship with ourselves, with others, with God, with creation. It's all relational, and we've got a relational God. And that's the amazing thing for me, is that God was in a relationship perfectly, didn't need us, and yet went, God, we want to share. We want to share this love and this relationship. And then did that with us. And then said, this is how you do a relationship, have a go at it. And we do a poor job a lot of the time because of all sorts of reasons. But often fear and woundedness, And I think this place allows space for people to heal, And I think, that idea that hurt people is what impacts on our relationships. And to be able to be in that place of being healed allows us to flourish and experience shalom. And sometimes we can't explain how healing happens either. I see people come in, particularly into the bush area at Peacemakers, and they just slow right down. And that slowing, that quietness, allows what's in a person to bubble up. And for them just to go, this is stuff I love about myself that I've forgotten. Here's some woundedness that I need to pay attention to. And then if they stay here long enough, they can pay attention to that I've had people come in and they don't talk about God, they talk about the universe and they talk about energy. For me, it's all the same thing. You know, God is all of that. And so I use their language, and just seeing, you know, when there's space for people to slow right down, God is already there, you know. It's not as if the space is magical. I mean, God's everywhere all of the time. But slowing down, being quieter and reflective allows us to see where God is moving. And just seeing people have those aha moments and just feeling at times the Spirit shows up. And I just go, whoa, like this is, wow, there's something going on. I don't need to know what it is. And it's just beautiful. It just feels such a privilege to be part of that process.
Now, I've never sat down with a spiritual director like Shannon before, but the times that I've gone looking for peace have left me wondering if the dictionary definition of it is somewhat lacking. As I said to Shannon, the concept of Shalom seems to be a lot more comprehensive. And in the way that Shalom focuses on relationships being put right, I think it gets at the core of what causes a lack of peace, that being broken relationships, no matter whether you're thinking about peace for individuals or entire countries, which is where the rubber really seems to hit the road.
Protests, arson attacks.
They were pulling me out from here, and the ceiling fell from this room.
Pressure is growing to attack big targets, including nuclear facilities that could be used to make a bomb.
A personal sense of peace is fantastic. I'm not out here saying it isn't worth pursuing. Looking around the world, however, there is undeniably a desperate need for peace on a much, much larger scale. But how do we bring that about? And for those of us guided by our spirituality, which for myself and those I interviewed is a Christian faith, what role does that play? Adrian Leason is a husband and dad. He works as a teacher and helps to run the large gardens on his property in Otaki, where he and his family attend the local Catholic church. He's also someone who has taken drastic action in the name of peace, but he doesn't seem so concerned about a traditional sense of peace for himself.
My life is quite complex. I built 22 little houses all over our farm, and all those little houses are full of homeless people who have severe and chronic psychotic unwellness, and many who are addicts and self-medicating on and so they cannot access market housing. So people turn up, you know, with a shopping trolley. People turn up desperate, living in cars and under hedges. And so that's very disruptive. There's no peace. And I've got a great relationship with the police and social workers and corrections and probation and all these other people who are trying to, you know, I guess help others. It's very chaotic and disruptive, and there's no peace whatsoever. I mean, what's that? Is that a verse that says the peace of Christ that passes all understanding? I think that is real. And so the absence of struggle and difficulty is not the peace of Christ. And we, you know, and some would say that we have been a little bit deceived. Dietrich Bonhoeffer talks about cheap grace and this idea that we can just add a little Jesus overlay to our middle-class lives of comfort.
So if Adrian is willing to embrace an unconventional type of peace for himself, then what does he think that same approach looks like to bring peace for others?
We spend so much making war, $2 trillion a year, and you multiply that by the decades, and it's eye-watering. So we're prepared to pay a heavy price. We'll go without schools and hospitals to wage war, but the price of peace is also costly. What are we willing to pay for that? And we are going to disrupt our lives. When my wife and I decided that, let's try and disarm this spy base at Waihopai to disrupt the communications and the surveillance and the targeting of weapons. And maybe, just maybe, some people who we will never meet and who will never thank us, maybe they won't get harmed.
Now, though, as you've heard in the news, 3 people have been arrested following an attack on the Waihopai spy base near Blenheim early this morning.
And here is where we need a bit of context. Adrian was one of the 3 men who broke into the Waihopai Station secure communication facility near Blenheim in April 2008. Along with Sam Land and Father Peter Murnane, Adrian cut through the layers of security fencing and used gardening sickles purchased from Bunnings to deflate a dome covering one of the 2 satellites. The 3 of them prayed while waiting for the police to arrive and arrest them. After a 2-week-long trial, in which they admitted to breaking in, but used what is known as the greater good defence, the jury took only 2 hours to find all 3 of them not guilty.
And this may cost us our farm, it'll cost me my job, it'll put great stress on our family and on our 8 kids, and it'll be enormously disruptive and for an end that we can't even measure. We can't even measure. But I think that comes down to the heart of when Jesus says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So if my family was at risk, I would like someone on the other side of the world to go to great lengths to keep my family safe. And if that's what I want from him or her, then I need to be prepared to do the same. I need to go to great lengths to protect somebody, my brother on the other side of the world.
Adrian contributed a chapter to a book about the intertwining history of Christianity and peacemaking in New Zealand. At one point, he described standing with his wife, looking in on their kids as they slept, and in that moment, deciding to go ahead with breaking into Waihopai. When I put it to him that he must be one of very few people willing to disrupt his family to that extent, Adrian told me about the American ethicist Reinhold Niebuhr's idea of sublime madness.
It's mad to break and smash up spy bases. Never do it. Do not try this at home. This is absolutely stupid.
Adrian explained sublime madness as moments in life where you choose to put aside reasonable and logical thinking to do something that is considered to be mad.
It's part of being a spiritual person and a moral person, that you put aside rational and logical concerns and you do something irrational and counterintuitive. And you don't do it often because it's really stupid. But it's okay now and again. And there's this wonderful history in the church of fools doing all sorts of foolish things. Being an old fella, I can look back on a whole lifetime of moments of sublime madness, and it's a great way to live.
Which brings us to the question I wanted to ask everyone I spoke to. For people who are seeking peace, whether or not that's motivated by a religious faith at all, there are going to be people who see their role within that quite differently. You've got people like yourself who sit more in the kind of pacifism camp. You've got people who will be seeking that through activism. You've got people who will be seeking that through actual conflict. Do you think it's possible for those people to work together towards a common goal or a common idea of peace for others?
I think it's always good to enrich our knowledge and understanding from people from different perspectives. But I think it's hard to justify using evil methods to achieve good outcomes. I think good outcomes. I'm a gardener. We have large gardens, and if you pour toxic, herbicides and pesticides all over your garden to kill weeds and bugs, you're going to get bad outcomes from your soil and from the plant. So I think there is good methods and good processes and good conscience and a disarmed heart is going to lead to you reaching out to your adversary and finding the humanity and the goodness and the decency in them and forming a bridge. I mean, the idea is to not make everyone the same. That there was a time that in Jerusalem, Muslims and Jews and Christians would help each other in the practice of their religion. They would enjoy each other's food and culture, and it was enriching. I don't want to paint too much of an idealistic, but there are many who lived in that city at that time and said, everyone can belong, everyone is welcome, everyone can practice their faith and their customs, and that's for the benefit and enrichment of everyone. Yeah. So I don't think we need to fix each other and save each other. We just need to not kill each other.
That idea of our ability to collaborate in order to help bring peace is one that I don't hear talked about very much. Adrian's ethos aligns with pacifism, influenced by his Christian faith. But I'd argue that most people think of military action when they think of peace being brought to a larger population. This is what brought me to Dave Lacey, the lead chaplain for the New Zealand Defence Force. Dave joined the New Zealand Army as a 17-year-old and served for 22 years as a soldier. He then spent 12 years as a civilian, went through a cancer journey and was ordained as an Anglican priest, and then re-enlisted into the Defence Force as a chaplain in 2012. In our conversation, Dave defined peace as
an inward feeling. It's a certainty and an assurance.
When I asked him how the Defence Force defines peace, he said that there are times where there might not be direct conflict, but there is still injustice and oppression. He said,
the Defence Force would probably view peace as a situation where people can live openly without fear. I think there's quite a subtle difference there. When you can live without fear of starvation or oppression or conflict, it's a much better environment. I remember back in the 90s hearing, he's now Sir Jerry Mataparai, speaking before we deployed into Bougainville. And I distinctly remember him saying that, we would win the people over with our guitars and our culture, rather than going in there with force. Although the NZDF is an armed combat-capable force, the actual use of lethal force is always the very last option that is employed. Absolutely, we need to train people, we need to prepare to use lethal force, but it's always the last option. The laws of armed combat, the rules of engagement and things like that, always are very clear about that it is absolutely the last option, where we'd much prefer to use other means to bring peace.
When I asked Dave if his interpretation of peace as a Christian ever butts heads with the Defence Force's view, he said it doesn't.
I don't see a conflict. I'm sure others would probably see it different ways. But I think in some ways, you can describe this in the same way that, Jesus calls us to love our neighbours. And I think in this instance, the word he used for love, he doesn't mean that we have to love a person as I love my wife or I love my children and grandchildren. That doesn't even mean we have to agree with that person or particularly like them. But what it does mean is that we only want the best for that person and that we wouldn't want to see them come to harm. So, I think it all sort of plays in together.
I was doing some research and I came across a comment from, I think he would have been an old colleague of yours, the Reverend Captain Paul Stanaway.
Yep.
Soldiers and Christians, I would suggest, do not seek to kill or harm. We seek to protect and serve.
And so how have you, in your deployments or even just kind of while you're working here in New Zealand, how have you dealt with moments when protecting and serving has resulted in harm to or the death of others?
That's quite a complicated question. And look, I know Paul, and I absolutely agree with that comment that he makes. The thought of taking a life that belongs to somebody else is it's a huge thing. And actually that act of taking a life is incredibly hard for the majority of people to do. There's some great books written on the whole process behind trying to take a life, even to the point where, after the American Civil Wars, they've dug up muskets that have multiple balls rammed in the barrels because these people were only going through the motion of shooting. They never actually pulled the trigger. So for a lot of people, it's a really, really hard thing to do. Yes, I've met people who have been in combat and have been engaged. The thing that I've noticed is those who have a strong faith deal with it a lot better than those that don't. And I think this comes down to, again, and I mentioned before, the laws of armed combat and the rules of engagement are very clear on when and how lethal force can be used. And if all those things are in place and it comes to that, making that decision, then you have to make the right decision. Still an incredibly hard thing to do, But that's a decision that you have to make. And, you know, I think when all those things are in place and you've had to take a life, then you can reflect on it and go, well, actually, I've done what I needed to do. I've done the right thing. And I remember giving a presentation a number of years ago on the Christian approach to killing. And really, for me, it boils down to, you know, one of the 10 commandments. And there's a bit of a misunderstanding about the commandment where a lot of people say, you know, the commandment is thou shalt not kill. Well, actually, if you look at the Hebrew, what it actually says is thou shalt not commit murder. And there's a subtle difference between committing murder and killing. And you know, and I guess there's a huge conundrum in there for a lot of people. But at the end of the day, if you're forced to take a life under those conditions, well, then you've killed. You haven't committed murder. If you take somebody's life when those conditions aren't in place, well, that effectively is murder. And you know, that's why we have war crimes.
Is it purely within kind of your reading of the 10 Commandments that sits comfortably with you in line with your Christian faith?
Look, I think that's a huge influence. But you know, here's a prime example. As a chaplain, under the Geneva Convention, I'm allowed to be armed for self-protection, as in self-defence, and in defence of anybody I might be ministering to. So, you know, I've been deployed. I've borne weapons. You know, it's one of those things you hope and pray that you never have to use them. And fortunately, I obviously never have. The interesting thing is, if I was ever confronted with that situation, would I? I can't answer that because I've never been put in that situation. You know, I hope and pray that, you know, I never am. And you know, at the same, I hope nobody ever has to be in that situation where they have to make that decision. But if I was defending my life and you know, somebody who I was ministering to, I think I probably would. But again, you know, I tend to that by saying I don't know until I'm put in that situation.
When we're seeking peace, whether or not that's for someone who's motivated by a religious faith, as I've sort of described before, there are going to be people all along that spectrum, people who are involved in conflict, activism, pacifism, you know, conscientious objection. Is it possible for them to work together towards a common goal of peace?
I would sincerely love to think so. And you know, I think it's, again, and if I talk from personal experience, it's about your ability to relate to people, no matter who they are, and deliver something that makes a difference in their lives. I've been deployed to Iraq. I was over there a number of years ago. Where we were working, we had a group of interpreters that worked for us, and I arrived in the office early one morning, and there was an Australian senior NCO grabbed me and said, "Oh, Petra, we need you to come with us." I said, "Sure, what's up?" He says, "Oh, one of our interpreters died last night. We've got a group out in the field. We're bringing them back. We just want you to talk to them." And so, yeah, okay. So anyway, we rock over there. These guys, you know, social media being what it is, they already knew. This Australian takes me over there and goes, "I brought the Padre. He's going to talk to you," and he bolted and left me with these guys. And so here I am standing there as a New Zealand chaplain in the middle of Iraq with a group of Muslim men. But grief's a universal language. And so, you know, I just talked a little bit about grief. And then, you know, once we talked through this stuff, I said, "I appreciate you'll have things that you need to do. Look, you're free to go. But if there's anything I can do to help and support you, you know where I am." And I went to turn away, and one of them goes, "Oh, Dave, before you go, will you pray for us?" So I'm standing there going, "So you're asking a Kiwi chaplain in the middle of Iraq to pray for a group of Muslim men?" And it was, yes, I'd love to. It was one of those moments where you go, "Lord, I'm not quite sure what you're doing to me here, but here goes." So I prayed what I'd refer to as a fairly vanilla prayer, used language that was suitable for the situation and appropriate to them. And when I looked up, every single one of them was in tears. And it was like, "Oh, thank you, Lord." I didn't quite expect that, but that was amazing. Because of the situation and how this person had died, you'll be aware that in the Islamic faith, they'll want to bury him within, you know, before the sun goes down. But because of the circumstances, they couldn't, and they had to be an autopsy. So it wasn't until the day after that they could actually have the funeral and bury this guy. The day of the funeral, the lead interpreter came over and found me and said, "Dave, when we get back from the funeral, we'll all be gathering and we'd like you to come and join us." I said, "Oh, yeah, be privileged to. Anyway, he came and picked me up. We walk over to where all these interpreters are, and on the way over I said, so what's the go here? And he said, we sit around, we pray, we drink coffee, and then we'd like you to address us. And it was like, oh Lord, what are you doing to me this time? Anyway, we went across there, and there must have been about 30 of them all sitting around, so I got introduced to those I didn't know, and we sat around there and drank coffee, which makes your eyeballs just want to bounce out of your head. And we talked for a while, and I mean, in the middle of Iraq, the cradle of civilization, Abraham came from just up the road, and we're sitting there talking about this with these Muslim men because they'll always test you. And then they said, we would like you to speak to us all. And I'd been thinking about this, so what I did was, I knew I was fairly safe to talk about the Proverbs, so I used Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. But I turned it around and said, if we believe that this is the will of God, and so I was using terms that they'll understand and drew that out a bit. And then I used, I think it's John 11:35, Jesus wept, because they acknowledged Jesus, not as the Messiah, but as a prophet. And I said, if it was good enough for Jesus to cry when a friend died, it's okay for us to share our emotions and sort of tease that out. When I left, it wasn't handshakes, it was hugs. They treated me like a brother. So, to me, that's how you bring peace into a situation where you wouldn't normally sit with people who wouldn't probably normally want to listen to you. But if you do it the right way and do it well, then you can have a huge impact.
Back at Peacemakers, I asked Shannon what drawbacks she sees in just defining peace as the absence of conflict.
It's so thin. It's just like people can just stay sad and small and just almost, and then they can feel very righteous that I'm not doing this terrible thing, therefore I'm really good. It doesn't help people open their hearts to more. And it doesn't allow love to grow. So I think Shalom has this ability to multiply exponentially love, and that's what my faith is all about. It's about love.
Shannon and I had talked a lot about personal inner peace based on the idea of Shalom and on her experience helping others. So to finish up, I asked her what she thinks would change if we viewed a resolution to the wars, conflicts and genocides that are happening and will happen through the lens of Shalom.
Well, I think those massive conflicts are particularly challenging because what I notice is that people are othering other humans and they're making them unhuman or subhuman, and they're going, you're different to me, when actually we have more in common than anything. And I think they have no concept of what Shalom is other than for their particular group of people. They say, our group, this is what Shalom looks like and we need to fight for that, rather than realising that Shalom is a gift for the whole world and working out how do we do that for everyone, rather than fighting for our little bit. It comes from that whole scarcity mentality or a privileged mentality, or, there's a whole lot of biases that feed into that idea of I have to hold on to what's mine and I have the right to fight for it. There's not much humility in the world. I think that's probably part of it as well. Becoming humble and going, I don't know everything, you have something to offer, your country's amazing, our country's amazing, how do we work together? It's just this sense of greed and I have to have power to survive in this world, which feels like a really dark energy to me.
By now you know what's coming. Does Shannon think it's possible for everyone working towards peace to work together, regardless of their opinion on the best way to do so?
My hope would be that we could appreciate each other, and just go, wow, you are designed to be this amazing frontline activist and you do that incredibly well. And I've got a friend like that. And I just go, whoa, that's incredible. And he shares his knowledge about how to do that and do that well, and just in case I ever want to. And I just go, I'm not sure. But I did go on my first protest march this year, so maybe I'm moving towards that. But he appreciates that here is a space that we hold where people can come and experience peace in themselves. And my greatest hope is that those that are on the front line could come apart here, be replenished, be renewed, so that frontline stuff will be fed from this heart of love and this place of flourishing rather than from this place of anger. I think if we can all see that we all have the best interests of the world at heart, and we're designed a particular way to live that out, and we can spend time getting to know each other and appreciating that and have this sense of love undergirding everything, no matter how it looks, then definitely we can all work together. And we can appreciate one another and go, that's amazing what you do, how can I help you? This is what I do, how can these collaborate together, you know? I think if it's done in that sort of heart, then definitely, yeah. It's where your heart is at, and how you approach people. If you see that, you know, we're all made in the image of God and we all have beauty and intrinsic quality, then it's going to work.
I really enjoyed those 3 distinct insights into peace. I love how Shannon finishes. I love her challenge to the poor definition of peace that the dictionary offers us. I love her challenge to engage with peace in this spiritual and hopeful way. And literally that she is extending herself to protest. I love that. I love that she is, growing her peace, so to speak, and bringing peace to others personally. And look, it was a challenge. Listening to some of what Dave said, I found really challenging. And I found listening to Adrian challenging. Yeah. His embodiment of peace is very uncomfortable. It's very sacrificial. He has sacrificed his own comfort and ease to care for others. It's intense.
It is intense.
And challenging.
Yeah. Especially when he's so open and upfront about the fact that there is no, you know, people talk about looking for peace and quiet. There is none of that where he lives.
Yeah.
None of it.
And yet he is energized by what he's doing.
Completely.
And has joy. So it's not all suffering. It's actually, there's quite this vibrancy about what he's doing. And so you're like, wow, what a guy, what a human. Go you. And for Dave, holding that space is, it's fascinating to think about how we reconcile things within our heads and hearts and our worldviews. And it's nice to hear different views. I feel inspired from the 3 voices to actively engage peace, to keep actively engaging, and to turn my radar on, to be like, where, in what space, and with whom might I increase peace?
Yeah.
Very cool. If you're enjoying this episode, share it with a friend. It's easy to do. Just copy a linky thing and copy and pasty woo and dippity do into your amazing cell phone there and send it to someone you like or love or whose life could do with more peace. If you want to send us a review, that's not impossible to do. You just have to find the 3 dots or the 7 stars or the 13 links to review button land. So good luck with that.
Starting to sound like the 12 days of Christmas.
Yeah, I know. You actually just have to, if you're doing it on Apple, you just have to scroll to the biggity bottom. We are Sunday Sanctuary NZ on Instagram. Feel free to join us there.
Sunday Sanctuary with Petra Bagust.
And the people in our neighborhood, they would if they only could meet and shake the other's hand, work together for the good of the land, give us all an equal chance. It could be such a sweet romance. And the soldiers who are dead and gone, if only we could bring back one, he'd say we gotta have peace.
We've Got to Have Peace by Curtis Mayfield. Just a little taste of peace there in that waiata. And what we thought we'd do now is light a candle in the name of peace. And this, my friends, has been done before. I'm using matches today. And I'm going to pose a question and give you some space, not exactly quiet, but toward quiet, where you can think about this question. So allow me to light the candle. Almost first pop. Put the flame to the wick. And I can see this candle. It's sitting essentially on my lap in front of me. And there's something about a flame, right? If you've ever stood in front of a fire, it nearly went out. The flame went down and down and down and down, and now it's risen. There's something magnetic almost, mesmerizing is the word I was looking for, about watching an open fire. So picture, if you will, a flame, a burning that's slightly mysterious, that stays as it reduces the wax of the candle. And I'd love you to hold space for the thought, within what relationship could I bring more restoration? How might I contribute restoration to a relationship? And it might be within yourself, within a spiritual context, within your daily life, or with whenua, with the land. Let me add that if intrusive thoughts or noises happen or intrude, let them, and return to your question, where might I contribute restoration? So, my friends, take a moment and let your minds fly, explore, wonder. It's a pretty profound thing to walk towards healing a break, walk towards increasing peace. And I know at times it requires us to get out of our comfort zones. So, for whatever you thought about, felt, or sensed, I bless that in your mind and your body and your soul.
Sunday Sanctuary.
Now, as has become our custom, we're going to reflect on the ancient practice of communion, a ritual instituted by Jesus the night before he died. As they began this final meal together, Jesus equated the food and drink to his body and blood. He was about to be overwhelmed by powerful enemies, betrayed by a friend, conspired against by the religious elite, and ultimately strung up by the most dominant empire in the known world. This was a moment of violence, not peace. But Jesus had quite a bit to say about peace. In his core teaching, which he'd toured the country preaching for the past 3 years, he said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." He said, "Love your enemies, love your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you." He said, "Do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Take the hit, don't hit back." Now that might sound tough even for the odd slap, but what about real violence? What about obscene injustice? Well, Christ was about to face that, and he did so in a manner that revolutionized our whole concept of peace. At the time, Jesus was actually living under the Pax Romana, a propaganda term describing the relative peace that had been brought about through the oppressive might of the Roman Empire. Step out of line and you'd be crushed. Defy Rome and they'd make an example of you, nailing you to a cross on a high point near a busy road, a human billboard of Roman might. This is the Pax Romana. The way of Rome sat in stark contrast to the way of Christ. His example and teaching has inspired non-violent resistance the world over, including Te Whiti and Tohu at Pariaka, who in turn inspired Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. Instead of leading a revolt, as most would-be messiahs had done, Jesus submitted to the violence. He took it in. He absorbed it. Instead of returning hate for hate, he took it into himself, extinguishing that violence and that hatred. And he rose again. He overcame not just the power of Rome, but the power of death itself. Jesus was an instrument of peace. That was Peace, Peace by Bill Evans, or part of, but you get the idea. The whole way up there is 6 minutes and 40 odd seconds if you'd like to listen to it in its entirety. It's good to get a piece of peace every now and then. Now we're going to talk to Rev Frank Ritchie because we had some great kōrero in the office around this idea of peace and it being much more than the absence of friction or the absence of conflict or the absence of anybody disagreeing with anybody else. So, here he is, the man himself. Rev Frank Ritchie, always a pleasure, never a chore.
Good.
Today, well, hang on, let me just check. Yep, no, pretty much never a chore. Today we're leaning into peace, and this is because Sam is interested in peace, and so am I. But my perception of peace as a child was an absence of action. Like peace was when you were doing nothing bad. And already we've heard from Shannon and Adrian and Dave, one in the military, one in activism, and one like engaging human beings in making peace. So all three of them with very different kaupapa, but actively in their hearts and souls working for the ultimate goal of peace or human flourishing and unity. Other words for peace, right? So as a person who is theologically inclined, where are you at personally with peace? And then I want to take it beyond the personal.
When it comes to how I understand it?
Yeah.
The word, I'm not sure if you've discussed it then yet. Have you discussed the word shalom?
A little. Shannon talked about it. Keen to hear your thoughts.
Well, I probably wouldn't go any deeper. The word shalom is about restoration. So as Christians, we believe that there's a fundamental break in the world. That break is about relationship. It's a break between the relationship that we have with God, we have within ourselves, that we have with each other, and that we have with creation. So where the word peace is used in the Bible, it's translating that word. And so the pursuit of peace is the pursuit of the restoration of relationship with God, with creation, with each other, and within myself.
Is it possible?
don't think it's possible to fully heal that. I'm a great believer that there will come a day when that gets fully healed and fully realised, but I have the opportunity, or we have the opportunity, to provide glimpses of that, to pursue that, because that's God's intent for creation. And so many times we'll fall flat on our face, or we'll give a glimmer of it, and then that glimmer will disappear. But I think it's the responsibility of people of faith to pursue it at all times.
So, God, that's a gauntlet. The responsibility of people to pursue restoration at all times.
When you think about it, if my understanding of Christianity revolves around the empty tomb, the idea that Jesus was crucified, and as ludicrous as it sounds to the 21st century materialist mind, that he rose again, and that tomb was empty.
So came alive, walked around.
But it wasn't just a resuscitation in Christian theology. What rose from that tomb involved his physical body as the seed of something new. But what rose was the first fruits of something new, a new creation. So there was a glimmer of what a restored humanity would look like in that risen person of Jesus. And so Christianity ever since then has been working out, if that is true, what does that mean for how we live? And if he was the first fruit of a new creation, and we've got an understanding of what that new creation will look like when it's brought to its fullness, our whole pursuit is living that out in some way. So the whole New Testament, post-resurrection, is those new Christians working out, what does it mean to live as if that's true? What does it mean to pursue Shalom and that new way of being, that new creation?
We went deep fast then.
We did.
We really went there, because that is quite radical, like how Jesus showed up after crucifixion is quite profoundly unpinnable, downable. Like, it is quite supernatural and mysterious and
yeah.
So you are slightly fascinated with some of the characters in the early Christian church, people like St Francis of Assisi. And there is one of his attributed writings where it's said St Francis of Assisi writes a prayer and he calls us to become instruments of peace. Sounds nice, right?
Yeah.
You can imagine a cornet or a trombone or a flute. Become an instrument of peace. How do you interpret that call to action?
I interpret that call to action as something that is deeply hard. I think especially it's easy to hear it in a way that fits into the kind of modern wellness industry, where peace is about the pursuit of bliss and feeling.
The modern wellness industry, let's go.
And a feeling of bliss. Now, I'm a fan to a degree of the modern wellness industry. I buy self-help books all the time because I think they're wonderful. I buy books about meditation, seeking that bliss. But I think there's a danger in hearing instrument of your peace. Make me an instrument of your peace in that blissful term. Help me be someone who pursues bliss and helps others find their bliss. Yes. Whereas if that's about the pursuit of Shalom, it involves being able to recognize brokenness, confront brokenness, but not just confront brokenness because it's easy to criticize as well, but to be involved in the healing. I actually think in our culture that bends itself towards criticism regularly. I think that being involved in the healing in some instances is the more challenging part. So to be an instrument of his peace means confronting brokenness, seeing brokenness, confronting brokenness, and being involved in the healing.
Adrian would so agree, right? This is the dude who broke into the spy base, who says peace is a very uncomfortable, challenging pursuit that involves suffering, and has 20-something plus minor dwellings on his property looking after people where he is trying to reconcile or invite them into a space and place where they might be more reconciled, restored to themselves. They're in grave mental health scenarios. They're living that out. There's a whole lot of discomfort involved in that making of peace. Like, ouch.
Yeah. Yeah. And it'd be easy to hear something like that and go, well, I could never do that. But I think it's about what's in front of us. So make me an instrument of your peace. Not make me like that guy who's pursuing your peace. Make me an instrument of your peace. So then who is the me that's coming to the table? What's the capacity of that me? What tools does that me have available that can then be contributed into peace? So I'm probably never going to be like that. But there are ways that I, Frank Ritchie, can pursue those things.
How have you pursued peace in your life?
In various ways. I would say that the talkback radio work that I've done is that to a degree, and I could explain that in various ways. Back in the day when I was on Christian radio, that was confronting some specific ideas that I thought contributed to brokenness and inviting people into a different way of thinking about things. Now in talkback radio that I do, it's more about how I engage with the audience. But it's the chaplaincy work that I do as well. In the media space, that's all about that pursuit of peace, recognizing where there is brokenness, giving a space where people who might have a sense of brokenness, a place where they can share that, and then being involved in that healing somehow.
Nice. And that is, I guess, the gift of your time, energy, attention. So that involves you applying yourself to that scenario with diligence.
Yeah. And then there are other things that have been in my capacity. I worked for a Tear Fund for a while, an aid and development agency. There's the stuff that we give to as a family. There's the local church work that I did and being directly involved in people's lives. So there are a number of things. And again, people might run the risk of hearing me talk about that and go, but I could never be like that. And just as I would say, I can never be like that guy.
Yeah, me too.
But again, it's just a question of who am I and what do I bring to the table of peace.
Yeah. Maybe there's something there about letting what you can do or will do or have done or are doing being enough and keep doing it. Where might you expand it or where might you grow it? Or like I think about the things I'm not doing and I'm like, does that wipe away everything I'm doing because I haven't said yes to this person and this person and this person yet? Am I failing in my pursuit of restoration or peace?
Yeah.
Because I really am disappointing some people and letting some people down, you know.
Well, we run the risk of burning out, I think, too. I mean, that's part of the equation if you run too hard. But for some people, it might just be being more intent in the relationships that they have. Showing up and being willing to truly listen to someone rather than just trying to get your own bit out of a conversation. It can start as simple as that. In the supermarket, treating somebody with a bit more dignity than you otherwise might have. Every choice that we make, every action that we participate in can contribute or not to peace. And in Christianity, we have the ultimate challenge there because we very easily in our culture create enemies. Anybody doesn't think like us, they're an enemy, whereas Jesus lays down the challenge. And I think it's where his message is where the rubber really meets the road, to love your enemies and to pray for those who persecute you. Like that is the ultimate challenge
actually doing that,
of the
right?
Christian faith. Yeah.
Love the people who you can't stand and pray for meaning not weaponized prayer, eh? Like pray for their
well-being, for their restoration, for their healing. And this is why I like St Francis.
Yeah, I was going to say, so enemies, let's talk.
Yeah, so St Francis, and one of the reasons I love the saints is because if I believe that Christianity is the pursuit of living out life as if that resurrection was real, then the saints are examples of people who have done that in varying contexts. And the church has said, hey, that person with all their failings, they've done it well. And so I look at someone like St Francis, who lived a life, and we're talking late 12th century, early 13th century, so I think he was born like 1181, died at the age of 48, I think. He was young, and lived a pretty frivolous, well-to-do life, and then had a number of things that led him into poverty, taking a vow of poverty and choosing poverty. Now, there are a few things about how he viewed the world that then shaped how he acted. He saw creation as a mirror of God. So his enactment of life and creation with the animals and the plants was quite magnificent. Brother Moon, Sister Sun. Like he saw creation as family because that's the expression of God. He believed that God was in every single person. which if you truly believe that, or at least a bit willing to be challenged by that, that then shapes how you see the enemy. So he was around when Europe was engaging in crusades in the Middle East. Big, complicated conversation in and of itself. But the Fifth Crusade was taking place. And in 1219, the Crusaders were attacking an Egyptian city because they saw Egypt as the way to get to Jerusalem. If they could take Egypt, they could eventually get Jerusalem. So the Crusaders they had besieged an Egyptian city for about a year. St Francis turns up. They attack it. It's a bloody battle. They're not successful, and so then a 4-week ceasefire is agreed to. And the Sultan of Egypt, St. Francis, decides he's going to go and meet with him. So meet with the leader of the enemy. And in all accounts, he wants to convert him. Nobody has any idea what happened in that meeting. But St. Francis leaves that meeting, and then the Franciscans are given the ability to act as custodians of a whole bunch of holy sites in the Middle East, and have done ever since, all because of that meeting. And the Franciscans are the order that St. Francis began.
So they're the monks, aren't they?
So
holy people set apart.
Yep, and distinct, and you'll recognize them in that they wear brown robes. Sometimes a little bit more fashionable now when you encounter them in the Middle East, but generally those kind of brown robes.
So to paint a picture, the Sultan of Egypt was a Muslim man.
Yep.
St. Francis is a Christian man.
The nephew of Saladin, the great Saladin. Saladin was like, if you go back in Muslim history, he's like one of the greatest heroes. So we're talking about the nephew of Saladin.
And there's a ceasefire where the Crusaders, the Christians, are failing. They haven't managed to succeed, so they are currently perceived to be weaker, possibly. Yep,
and there's a lot of bad blood here. So it's really easy to view in the way that we often talk about the Crusades, Crusaders bad guys, and the Middle East is being attacked. It was way more complicated than that. A lot of horrific stuff went on, but Muslims had been attacking Christian villages, and pilgrims who were trying to make their way from Europe to the holy sites at places like Jerusalem were being harassed and sometimes murdered, which all of the complicated clash between empires is going on. But
makes sense, right?
The Sultan is the ultimate enemy. St. Francis is like the epitome of Christendom. And St. Francis decides, because the enemy here has God in him. The enemy is not simply the enemy. He's the embodiment of God in some way. So therefore, he is worthy of conversion. As bad as that sounds to the 21st century mind, that comes from a place of love. So St. Francis saw the other as worthy of sitting and having conversation with. And again, whatever went on in their dialogue clearly created enough respect that the Franciscans still hold quite a key place in the Middle East.
What happened to that city in Egypt? Do we know?
The Crusaders got it for a little while, and then the Muslims took it back, which is
sounds like war. Sounds like human beings fighting over whenua. Wow. Okay, so in that scenario, I guess St. Francis is showing up and enacting his love of enemy by going and sitting and speaking with and treating as...
And ultimately, as he did with everybody, just enacting something, going contextually, okay, how do I act here if this other person is the embodiment of God in some way? So if Christ or God is in this person, how do I act towards them? Now, you imagine if we encountered every single person in our lives like that. This person is someone created in the image of God. They're worthy of dignity and respect no matter what I think about them, no matter what views they hold. That doesn't mean that we don't disagree, we don't have some robust conversations, and we don't even disconnect relationship with some people because it might lead to abuse if it doesn't happen. But it fundamentally shifts, I think, what we're heading towards. And I think if you see someone else as created in the image of God, as embodying God in some way, then that can only lead to the pursuit of confronting brokenness and moving towards healing.
Yeah, it's a pretty good challenge. And obviously, it makes a difference depending on what your perception of God is.
Yes.
Like, if you have this perception of God as ultimate, love and redemption, ultimate restoration, ultimate right relationship. That's going to be different than you perceive God as a warmongering white man in robes sitting on a throne with a big stick. I think there's some theology to get under your belt there to be able to go, wow, the author of restoration, the author of wholeness, the author of life and healing, if I can see the essence of that in the other. And that is pretty confronting, and like you say, doesn't mean we don't protect ourselves, because some people are dangerous to be in close relationship to. So I want to honour that mention. I like the idea of an orientation towards peace and asking myself the question, what peace can I make today? Or where might I bring peace? Whether that's to myself, to others, to my relationship with God, to my relationship with the land. Like that feels positive and not necessarily like self-flagellation either.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking out to notice. And maybe that's also supporting others who make peace in the myriad ways it can be made.
Which I think, as we hear all this, means that when we hear St Francis's request to make me an instrument of your peace, we're not talking about something airy-fairy woo-woo. We're talking about something that is grunty and worth taking hold of.
Allow me to leave you with a benediction. It's a prayer that was written by St Francis of Assisi, and of course it has been translated into English. Lucky for me. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. It is in dying that we are born again to eternal life.
I wanna promise you hope for a generation, hope for a generation.